What if the property you worked years to buy suddenly became harder to control, more expensive to run, and less profitable, almost overnight? Imagine waking up to find that new laws have quietly shifted the balance of power, and landlords across New Zealand are scrambling to understand what just changed. This isn't a future prediction, this is happening now. In 2026, a wave of newly passed landlord laws is set to reshape the property investment landscape in ways many investors never saw coming. Some of these changes sound harmless at first, but dig deeper, and the financial impact could be severe. From stricter compliance rules and increased tenant protections to higher costs and reduced flexibility, these laws may directly affect your rental income, your rights as a property owner, and even your long-term exit strategy. Here's the scary part. Many landlords won't realize the damage until it's too late. Fines, forced upgrades, longer dispute processes, and reduced control over your own property could quietly eat away at your returns. Small investors may feel the pressure first, but even seasoned property owners aren't immune. So the big question is this: are you prepared or are you exposed? Because whether you own one rental or an entire portfolio, these changes don't care how experienced you are. They apply to everyone, and ignorance won't be a defense. In this video, we're breaking down 10 shocking new landlord laws that could hurt your property investment in 2026. No fluff, no legal jargon, just clear, practical insight every landlord needs to hear right now. Stay with us, because what you're about to learn could save you thousands.
Number 10. The cost of living crisis has reached a breaking point. One of the strongest warning signs experts are pointing to is the cost of living crisis, which many believe is no longer temporary but structural. In recent years, New Zealanders have faced relentless increases in food prices, fuel costs, rent, utilities, and insurance, while wage growth has struggled to keep pace. By 2026, economists warn this imbalance could reach a breaking point, where everyday households are forced to make impossible choices just to survive. What makes this especially dangerous is that the pressure is hitting all groups at once: renters, homeowners, small business owners, and even middle-income families who once felt financially secure. Groceries that cost $100 a few years ago now cost significantly more, while essentials like electricity and transport continue to rise with global energy volatility. Experts argue that when basic living costs grow faster than income for too long, the result isn't just financial stress, it's social instability. Another concern is the ripple effect. As households spend more on essentials, they spend less elsewhere. This reduces consumer activity, hurts local businesses, and slows economic momentum. Over time, this can lead to job insecurity, business closures, and reduced tax revenue, putting even more strain on public services. By 2026, analysts warn that New Zealand may face a critical threshold where cost fatigue sets in. People are no longer able to absorb increases, no matter how small. This is why many experts describe the cost of living crisis not as a challenge, but as a system-wide stress test. How the country responds to this pressure may determine whether 2026 becomes a year of recovery or a year when things finally start to crack. Number 9. Housing pressure is no longer just a market cycle. For years, housing stress in New Zealand was explained away as a normal boom and bust property cycle. Experts are now warning that by 2026, this explanation no longer fits reality. Housing pressure has become structural, affecting renters, first home buyers, and investors at the same time, with no clear relief in sight. Rental demand continues to rise while supply struggles to keep up. Population growth, urban concentration, and tighter building regulations have all contributed to a market where finding affordable housing is increasingly difficult. At the same time, many landlords are facing higher compliance costs and tighter regulations, pushing some to exit the rental market altogether. This creates a dangerous loop: fewer rentals, higher demand, and more stress on tenants. For buyers, the picture is just as concerning. High deposit requirements, stricter lending rules, and elevated interest rates mean that home ownership remains out of reach for many, even as prices fluctuate. Experts warn that this combination traps a growing number of people in long-term renting, increasing pressure on an already strained rental system. What makes this situation especially risky in 2026 is that housing stress now feeds into broader economic and social issues. When people spend too much of their income on housing, they have less to spend on healthcare, education, and local businesses. This weakens communities and slows economic growth. Analysts increasingly agree that housing stress in New Zealand is no longer something that will correct itself with time. Without meaningful structural solutions, 2026 could mark the point where housing stops being just a market issue and becomes a national stability concern, influencing everything from workforce mobility to social cohesion.
Number 8. Population growth is outpacing infrastructure capacity. Another major warning sign experts highlight for 2026 is the growing gap between population growth and infrastructure readiness. While New Zealand continues to attract migrants, students, and returning citizens, the systems meant to support this growth, housing, healthcare, transport, and utilities, are struggling to keep up. Experts caution that when population growth moves faster than infrastructure expansion, pressure builds quietly until systems begin to fail. Hospitals are already experiencing longer wait times, and schools in high-growth areas are facing overcrowding. Public transport networks, especially in major cities, are stretched thin, leading to congestion, delays, and rising frustration for commuters. Infrastructure projects take years to plan and complete, yet population increases can happen rapidly, creating a dangerous timing mismatch. What worries analysts most is the cumulative effect. As services become harder to access, quality declines. Healthcare staff face burnout, classrooms become overcrowded, and roads deteriorate faster than they can be repaired. This reduces overall quality of life and can push skilled workers to consider leaving for countries with better functioning systems. By 2026, experts warn that infrastructure strain could begin to influence economic decisions. Businesses may hesitate to expand in areas where transport and utilities are unreliable. Families may avoid certain regions due to limited healthcare or education access. Over time, this creates uneven development and deepens inequality between regions. Population growth is not inherently negative, but without synchronized investment in infrastructure, it becomes a pressure multiplier. Analysts argue that 2026 may be the year New Zealand feels the full weight of this imbalance, making infrastructure capacity one of the most critical factors shaping the country's stability and future direction.
Number 7. The middle-class squeeze is accelerating. Experts are increasingly concerned that by 2026, New Zealand's middle class, long considered the backbone of economic stability, is facing mounting pressure from multiple directions at once. Rising living costs, higher mortgage payments, increased rent, and stagnant wage growth are slowly eroding what was once a comfortable financial buffer. What makes this trend alarming is how quietly it is happening. Many middle-income households are not officially classified as struggling, yet they are finding it harder to save, invest, or plan for the future. Everyday expenses like childcare, insurance, transportation, and groceries now consume a much larger share of income. As a result, discretionary spending shrinks and financial resilience weakens.
Experts warn that when the middle class loses its sense of security, the entire economy becomes more fragile. Debt is another growing concern. To maintain their standard of living, many households are relying more heavily on credit cards, personal loans, or extended mortgage terms. While this may offer short-term relief, it increases long-term vulnerability to interest rate changes or unexpected expenses. Analysts note that this rising dependence on debt is a classic warning sign seen in economies before periods of financial stress. By 2026, the middle-class squeeze could have wider consequences. Reduced consumer spending affects small businesses, while lower savings limit investment and retirement security. Social mobility also declines, as families find it harder to invest in education, housing, or entrepreneurship. Experts caution that a shrinking and stressed middle class isn't just a personal finance issue, it's a systemic risk. If this trend continues unchecked, 2026 may mark a turning point where economic pressure becomes deeply embedded in everyday life, reshaping New Zealand's social and financial landscape.
Number 6. Small businesses are quietly disappearing. One of the most overlooked warning signs heading into 2026 is the steady decline of small businesses across New Zealand. While major closures occasionally make headlines, many small shops, cafes, trades, and service providers are shutting down quietly without public attention. Experts warn that this silent erosion is a serious economic signal that should not be ignored. Rising operational costs are at the heart of the problem. Rent, electricity, insurance, wages, and compliance expenses have all increased, squeezing already thin margins. At the same time, consumers under cost of living pressure are spending less, making it harder for small businesses to stay profitable. For many owners, the numbers simply no longer add up. What makes this trend especially concerning is the role small businesses play in employment and community life. They provide local jobs, support regional economies, and keep neighborhoods vibrant. When these businesses disappear, job opportunities shrink, and communities lose essential services, leading to a slower and less resilient local economy. Experts also point out that small business closures often lag behind broader economic stress. In other words, when closures accelerate, it usually means financial pressure has been building for some time. By 2026, analysts fear New Zealand may see a noticeable increase in these shutdowns, reflecting deeper structural challenges rather than short-term setbacks. The quiet loss of small businesses is more than an economic statistic. It's a warning signal. It suggests that everyday entrepreneurship is becoming harder to sustain, and without intervention or relief, this trend could weaken New Zealand's economic foundation and social fabric in the years ahead.
Number 5. Investor confidence is starting to shake. By 2026, experts believe one of the most critical yet subtle warning signs is the gradual decline in investor confidence across New Zealand. Investors, whether in property, small businesses, or financial markets, tend to react not only to bad news, but to uncertainty. Right now, uncertainty is growing. Changing regulations, economic pressure, and unclear long-term policy direction are making many investors hesitant to commit. Property investors in particular are feeling this shift. Rising compliance costs, tighter rules, and changing tax conditions have altered risk calculations. Some investors are choosing to pause new purchases, while others are reconsidering whether to hold on to existing assets. When investment slows, it doesn't just affect portfolios, it reduces housing supply, limits business expansion, and slows economic growth. Business investment is also being affected. Entrepreneurs are delaying expansion plans, and overseas investors are taking a more cautious stance. Experts warn that when capital becomes cautious, innovation slows and job creation weakens. This creates a feedback loop where lower confidence leads to lower growth, which further erodes confidence.
What makes this particularly risky heading into 2026 is that confidence can be fragile. Once shaken, it takes time and clear leadership to rebuild. Analysts note that prolonged uncertainty can be more damaging than a single negative event, as it encourages a wait-and-see mindset across the economy. Investor confidence acts like a canary in the coal mine. Its decline suggests deeper concerns beneath the surface. If confidence continues to weaken through 2026, experts warn it could signal broader economic instability and reduced momentum across multiple sectors of New Zealand's economy.
Number 4. Debt levels are reaching uncomfortable heights. Another major red flag experts are watching closely as 2026 approaches is the rapid rise in household and national debt levels. While debt itself isn't new, the speed at which it has grown and the reasons behind it are raising serious concerns. Many households are no longer borrowing to invest or grow, but simply to keep up with everyday living costs. Mortgage debt remains especially high, with many homeowners locked into large loans taken during periods of low interest rates. As rates adjust and fixed terms expire, monthly repayments are increasing, putting additional strain on family budgets. At the same time, consumer debt through credit cards and personal loans is climbing, often used to cover essentials rather than discretionary spending. Experts warn that high debt reduces financial flexibility. When households carry heavy repayment obligations, they become more vulnerable to job losses, health issues, or economic shocks. Even small changes like a rate hike or unexpected expense can quickly push families into financial distress. On a broader level, rising national debt limits the government's ability to respond to crises. With more resources dedicated to debt servicing, there is less room for investment in infrastructure, healthcare, or economic stimulus. Analysts note that this combination of high household and public debt can amplify economic downturns. By 2026, debt may no longer be a background issue. It could become a central pressure point. Experts caution that without careful management and structural solutions, elevated debt levels could magnify financial stress across the economy, making recovery slower and instability more likely during uncertain times.
Number 3. Productivity growth is falling behind. As New Zealand moves closer to 2026, experts are increasingly alarmed by one persistent issue: weak productivity growth. Productivity, how efficiently a country turns work and investment into economic output, is one of the strongest drivers of long-term prosperity. When productivity stalls, wages struggle to rise, businesses face higher costs, and overall living standards begin to lag. Despite longer working hours and greater effort from workers, output per worker has not kept pace with comparable economies. Analysts point to several contributing factors, including underinvestment in technology, skills mismatches in the labor market, and infrastructure bottlenecks that slow down business operations. When productivity gains are limited, businesses often compensate by raising prices rather than improving efficiency, which feeds directly into inflation. What makes this particularly concerning is the connection between productivity and income growth. Without stronger productivity, wage increases become harder to sustain, especially in a high-cost environment. This leaves workers feeling overworked and underpaid, while businesses struggle to remain competitive both locally and internationally. Experts also warn that weak productivity reduces economic resilience. In times of global uncertainty, countries with strong productivity can adapt more easily. Those without it face tougher trade-offs, including cuts to public services or higher taxes. By 2026, analysts fear productivity stagnation could act as a hidden drag on the economy, one that quietly undermines growth without drawing immediate attention.
Unless addressed through innovation, skills development, and smarter investment, this issue could limit New Zealand's ability to navigate future challenges effectively.
Number 2. Rising inequality is fueling social tension. Another critical issue experts are closely monitoring as 2026 approaches is rising inequality and its growing impact on social stability. The gap between those who own assets and those who do not has widened significantly, especially in housing, savings, and investment opportunities. While some households have benefited from property ownership and market gains, others are struggling just to meet basic needs. This imbalance creates more than financial strain. It fuels frustration and division. When people feel locked out of opportunity, trust in institutions begins to weaken. Experts warn that prolonged inequality can lead to lower social cohesion, reduced community engagement, and growing skepticism toward economic and political systems. Young people in low-income families are often the most affected. With high housing costs and limited wage growth, many feel their efforts no longer lead to progress. This sense of stagnation can discourage education, entrepreneurship, and long-term planning, weakening the country's future potential. From an economic perspective, inequality also slows growth. When wealth is concentrated, overall spending declines because fewer people have disposable income. This reduces demand, hurts businesses, and creates a cycle that reinforces inequality further. By 2026, analysts caution that inequality may no longer be a background concern. It could become a driving force behind social tension and economic fragility. Addressing this divide is not just about fairness, it is about maintaining stability, trust, and long-term prosperity in New Zealand.
Number 1. Housing market instability signals deeper trouble. Heading into 2026, one of the most alarming signals experts are watching is the growing instability in New Zealand's housing market. For years, skyrocketing property prices fueled optimism among homeowners and investors alike, but recent trends suggest that this growth may be unsustainable. Prices in several key cities have started to fluctuate sharply, creating uncertainty for buyers, sellers, and investors. Rising interest rates and stricter lending conditions are already slowing demand, while supply shortages continue to push affordability further out of reach for many. This combination has created a volatile environment where small changes can have large ripple effects. Homeowners who purchased at peak prices may find themselves with negative equity, and investors face higher risks as rental yields fail to keep pace with costs. Experts also point out that housing instability has broader economic consequences. When households are stretched thin by mortgages or high rents, consumer spending declines, impacting local businesses and overall economic growth. At the same time, rising defaults and delayed purchases can strain financial institutions, creating systemic risks that affect more than just the property market. The housing market is often considered a barometer for overall economic health, and the current turbulence signals deeper structural pressures. If left unchecked, these fluctuations could undermine confidence in both the housing sector and the wider economy, making New Zealand more vulnerable to shocks as 2026 unfolds. This early warning emphasizes the need for careful monitoring and strategic planning by policymakers, investors, and homeowners alike. 2026 is shaping up to be a critical year for New Zealand, with economic, social, and financial pressures converging like never before. From housing market instability to rising inequality and declining productivity, the warning signs are clear. For property investors, business owners, and everyday citizens, understanding these trends is essential to protect your assets and plan wisely for the future. Stay informed, stay cautious, and take proactive steps now to navigate these challenges successfully. If you found this video insightful, like, subscribe, and comment with your thoughts. Don't forget to share this with friends who need to be aware.